Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lead Volunteers podcast. Super grateful that you're here. You know, we've gone international. We've had quite a few international guests, and I have another international guest today from the great country of Canada, and I'm excited for this podcast. Now, I want to tell you that, again, I'm kind of like letting more and more and more people know that we actually have some of these interviews, actually, they're done by video. And so we extract the audio, we put it on the podcast. But if you would like to watch this on YouTube, you sure can. You can look up Josh Denhart on YouTube. You could subscribe to that channel, and it'll be great. Well, here we go. Leanne, how are you?
Hey, I'm great, Josh. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Leanne Woelk, you are from the wonderful country of Canada. Just give us a little bit about yourself and your history, just a touch.
hmm Well, I am from Alberta, which is just above Montana. That's what I let people know. So in
That's very
Western
helpful. That's
Canada.
helpful because we in the States, we're like, there's like what, 5 provinces? We don't know where they are.
Oh, yeah, no, there's more than that.
Oh
But
no.
I'm married to my husband, Kevin, for 34
Oh
years.
wow.
We have two sons. One is married, and his lovely wife, Megan, they have a little Aurora. So I'm a grandma
Oh
now, and
man. I'll tell you
it's,
what, that's a
oh,
dream. That's a dream
it
of
is.
mine.
It's the best.
That is exciting.
And yeah, I've been doing children's ministries for over 30 years. Started out as a volunteer for
Yeah.
20 years. Finally got paid,
Yeah.
and it was great. And I've worked in churches, and then I worked as a children's ministry specialist for our district of our denomination.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and I work for small churches, medium churches, large churches, although my heart still always goes back to small churches.
I love
There's
that.
just something very special about them.
So you, Leanne, started like so many of us, right? A lot of people who find themselves in a children's ministry context, you're just you love the Lord, you love the scriptures, you love people, you love the church, you're participating at a high level. And then at some point, somebody says, hey, why don't you just take over? Right?
Mhm.
And that was my story as well. But it's exciting to hear that you persevered, developed your leadership, developed your skills for 20 years as a
Yeah,
volunteer. And then at that point, you transitioned. It's also cool that, those who are faithful in little are faithful in much. And so then
mm,
because of your faithfulness and God's grace, you actually had a leadership role in your entire denomination. That's huge.
huge. And it's only because of God, right?
Sure.
Because I kept saying, what am I doing here?
Well, it is because of God, but also it's your hard work and perseverance in the Lord, right?
Mhm, mhm.
I always say to people, God expects us to do more than sit by the field and pray for Him to plant seeds, right?
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
He's like, hey, well, you have a part to play. And so I'm grateful for how hard you have worked. Well, we're going to talk today about an interesting concept called volunteer roundabouts. And in, I what do you call them is it roundabouts in Canada?
Uh, well, traffic circles is
Traffic
more what we call
circles.
them.
Okay. And that was more of a European thing, and now it's starting to be far more popular in the United States. These things roundabouts, right? So it's a traffic circle. It kind of helps the flow of traffic, and it removes stop signs, right?
Mhm. That's right. So things can just keep going. And as long as everyone stays in their lane, there is a perfect opportunity for entering and exiting and having the right amount of time in that traffic circle. And really you can stay going around the middle
Yes.
forever.
Yes.
Kind
Yes.
of an interesting concept, actually. And yeah, I have found that this was something I really do believe the Lord gave it to me because I'm someone who is creative, and the Lord
Yes.
often gives me a visual, and this made sense to me for helping having volunteers come and work with me.
Yes. Okay. So it's kind of like an on ramp and an off ramp. And so we're
Yeah.
going to dive into this here real quick. One thing I'm excited about is, we always try to help the listener to have a mental scaffold, right? So that they can have some buckets into which we're going to put. So we're going to define it, we're going to develop it, and then we're going to do it and have you tell us where we should start. So again, one more time, what is this volunteer roundabout? We kind of explained it, but I want to go a little bit deeper.
All right. Well, if you can imagine in your mind a traffic circle, I'll probably default to traffic
That's,
circle just
that's
because that's
totally
what we
good.
call them. And if you would see it flat on a piece of paper, you would see at the bottom, you would come onto a traffic circle and you could stay in the one lane and you could leave. I'm using my hand as an illustration.
Yes.
You could, go off right away there. Or you could come on and you can go halfway and then you would go off the
Essentially
top.
straight. Essentially straight.
That's right. Right. Or you could go 3/4 of the way and go off this way.
Yes.
Or you could go all the way around and out where you had entered.
So
So,
yeah. So in other words, it's removing a stop sign, a four-way stop sign, and it's allowing the traffic to be continuous. You
yeah.
can get onto the roundabout or the traffic circle and take your right. You can
Yes.
skip the first right and go forward, and you're now back on your straight path. Or you take the second, or that would be the third right, and then you've actually essentially taken a left. Right, three rights makes a left.
This sounds like one of those, what is it? The Laurel and Hardy, I think they
Yeah,
do who's on
yeah,
first. It's
that's it.
kind of what it sounds like.
Yes, and you and
But
you and
once
you
you
can
figured it,
also yeah, and you can also take the fourth right, which is a U-turn.
yeah, yeah. And when you figure it out, it's impressive how well it actually works. And so that model has
Yeah.
become children's ministry volunteers on ramps and off ramps, and it has worked really, really well.
I like this. Now, I have to tell you, I like this concept better than the mental. Like when you brought this up today, I thought that's a way better mental image than I've been using. The
Oh,
one that I've
mhm.
been using, I call it um, the sunset clause. So you start, the sun comes up, high noon, we can check in, and then the sun is going to set, and you have an opportunity to go do
Mm,
something different. But I like the idea of the traffic circle because you can stay in this wonderful perpetual loop and participate for years and years and years. You don't have to take an exit, but there are
yes,
logical places where you could take an exit and reflect as to whether you want to continue to do this. I like that.
yes,
I
yeah,
I think it's a very good image.
yeah.
Well, I want to ask you now, why do you, I think it's inherent. I think we all could get this, but kind of just lay it out for us. What's the value of this traffic circle concept or this roundabout analogy as it comes in to our role to leading volunteers?
hmm Well, again, I look at this traffic circle or roundabout as our ministry year. So when you're planning out the coming year, a lot of you start in August. We start in September
Yes,
in Canada because we're trying to save a hold on to our summer. But let's go with August because I think a lot of your listeners will be
sure.
thinking that way. So if you look at each quadrant of the traffic circle,
Hmm.
it will be 3 months of the
Okay.
year. So we have August, September, October. You might have someone who that is just the ideal time for them. And the value that comes in being able to talk to someone about coming and being part of your kids ministry is that you can actually give them a start and an end time. And I think that is very valuable for anyone
I do too.
because we can do 3 months, right?
Agreed.
But if you tell me, oh, come and be part of kids ministry, and all of a sudden I'm thinking it's a whole year. So again, maybe they want to be a part of that and they can stay the whole time in that traffic circle.
Yes.
But other people can only do, let's just say someone really loves Christmas. Like that is
Right.
their thing. So maybe they only onboard no, November, December, and January. And that's their commitment to you. I would much rather have someone committed to those 3 months than, someone saying that they're going to do the
That's
full
right.
year and then they don't show up. And it it's hard on your relationship, and because you're calling and you're wondering why didn't they show up, or they're saying they're Xing out the planning center,
Yes,
all those
continually.
things.
Well,
Yeah.
I like this idea because, um, it's always been kind of a joke, but a lot of jokes are there's truth that's embedded in the joke. That's what makes it kind of ironic or funny. And I
Mm,
think that a lot of people have said, I've heard this many times, maybe at a children's ministry conference, and I say, okay, tell me your story. And they would say, well, I actually got in as a volunteer and they never let me out. And I just kept on the traffic circle. And now they just handed me the keys to the church. And at some point, they started handing me a check. I'm officially now a part of the staff. It was a weird
oh,
way to get involved. So some people might fear that by saying yes, that it's until Jesus comes, right? And
yeah.
it's for infinity, and that's very uncomfortable. But this
Yeah.
idea of having these boundaries and saying, okay, you're going to come on here, and here's your logical off ramp. Now you can, of course, we're always going to say, now listen, if you love this, you can keep on going,
Yeah.
but it at least provides them the bookends of beginning and ending. And I think that's psychologically super valuable for people.
Yeah, I do too. And as you describe that, like think again in your mind of what this looks like. There are always two lanes that come
Ah,
into the traffic circle. So you may know already ahead of time that you are just doing this one piece, or you can switch lanes as long as you use your signal.
yes, that's right.
But you can move over. And I mean, how many times does that happen? You just said it so well. Volunteers step into the role and then they they realize this is where I'm supposed to be.
Right.
Well, put that signal on and move on over to
Into
that
the
lane where
left
you get to
lane.
stay the whole day or the
Yes,
whole time.
it's
Yeah.
the left lane. And so the right lane is for people who are maybe trying out the
Yeah.
ministry. And they're
Yeah.
like, okay, I may exit, I may stay for 3 quarters of the year, but then all of a sudden, there are those people who have, it's like, hey, what I want to do is have people taste and see that the Lord is good through
Amen.
serving Him.
Yeah.
Taste and see that He's good. And you can get a taste of Him in a unique way by serving. And so as they're in the car and they're traveling around and they're volunteering, they may love it, get in the left lane, just
Yeah.
stay on the loop with us, right?
Yeah. And I've had many people in different seasons of their life, especially sports always kind of comes up as something like,
Yes.
oh, people won't come because sports. Well, find the season that they're
Yes.
in. I know even for myself, I was already working at the church, but I wanted to volunteer at my kids' school. Well, I could do that 3/4 of the way, or I should say half of the
Yes.
school year. Then we hit basketball season, and I couldn't do extra volunteering at the school because of that. But then once that was done, I was able to come back and do volunteering. So kind of think of it like that too. And
Yes.
I mean, we want to be excited for our volunteers and their involvement in their sports communities or other activities, because that's being outbound. We
It
want,
is.
we can't just stay in the church. We got to go
Yeah.
out. So those are opportunities too.
I think what you're saying is brilliant. And something that just came to my mind, Leanne, is that if we're not careful and if we're super rigid in what our structures
Mm,
are, then some people are going to say, well, I can't, my life doesn't really afford me to play by those rules. And so I
mhm.
guess that means that I'm out. And I
Yeah.
don't want them to be out. Uh,
No.
so what I'm also hearing from you is options.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I heard of children's pastor who
Uh-huh.
did something that I never actually ended up doing, but I really liked it. And this might be very beneficial to your listeners.
Sure.
He, at his church, he actually had a roundabout for every service. He had a person who would come in and do worship with the kids for 10 minutes. That person would leave, and the other person was already there, and they were getting ready for the Bible story. And then they would leave and the next person would come in. Now, it has to be coordinated well,
And
but
of course, of course.
essentially it was only 20 minutes of their time on a Sunday morning. Now, these services were long,
Hmm.
so that makes a difference to how long you have children. But for an hour and a half, which is what I was used to in my church,
Yes.
you could do that. And it, you always talk about burnout, Josh. It did not burn anybody out. There was a person just for snack. There was a
Yes.
person just for cleanup, and they
I
worked
think
as
that's
a
actually
team.
a really unique and intelligent idea.
Yeah, I think
And
so too.
and I think that of course maybe that works really good with a check-in volunteer.
Hmm.
It's just a 20-minute window. And
Yeah,
for the worship leading person, 20-minute window. For the game person, right? 20-minute window. For the snack person, for the cleanup person. But we probably would want, and I typically did, a longer term experience for the small group leader because they, of course, were going to be relationally
yeah.
developing with kids. And you don't want that to be as on board and off board, off ramp. But this is really good. I've never thought about.
Mhm.
Well, we did that a little bit, I guess, but I think that's a unique experience to have that those people coming in and out of. So it's really you're a traffic coordinator, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And and that is what we as the director, the coordinator, the children's pastor, and this can work in small churches, medium churches, large churches.
I
It
agree.
can, because what I have discovered, even though, as I say, the small churches where I have most of my experience, working with the large churches and three services, we have three very different services in this context of, we definitely have a medium size, a large size, and a small
Okay.
size. Third service is small.
Now
So,
I want to share about this because I experienced the same thing because
hmm,
at our church we had three services. We actually had a fourth on Saturday night, but in terms of the Sunday morning three services, the first service was very small because not that many young families attended that
mm,
service. And then
mm.
the flood of people was in the middle, and there was the second largest one. Is that what you found as well?
Yeah, for us, it's actually the third service is the smallest,
Okay.
and that, yeah, I don't know exactly why. We're still just post COVID. Like,
Right.
September was our launch. We've had 2 years of not much church services and things
Yes.
like that. So, yeah, it's we're having to reevaluate exactly what does this look like, and is this the trend? Will this stay looking like this? But again, I think it works really well, and
Yes.
I would totally agree with you about the small group leader, and that might just be the children's pastor or the children's coordinator who becomes that one constant. I think
I
that's
understood.
vitally important.
Yeah,
So I'm glad
there
we brought
must be
that
a
up.
constant. I would agree with that. Now, what
Yeah.
else would be of value as you've seen about this kind of roundabout idea, these on ramps and off ramps, or as you're talking about oh, what did you call it? The traffic circles. There you go. I'm not from Canada.
Oh, well, I think that there's just value in, again, the commitment that they can make is something that's attainable for
Yes.
themselves.
Yes.
They'll feel good about, I did it. I accomplished this goal, of giving the 3 months. I think that that is a piece of us having relationship with them,
Yes.
and we can we will know who to focus on.
Yes.
I mean, everybody's important, but we do have to focus on certain volunteers who, if I ever want to come off at the traffic circle for I mean, I was going to say for a sabbatical. I don't know how often that happens for children's pastors, but let's just say even a vacation. You
Yes.
have to know that Josh is going to be there, and
Yeah,
he
I'm going
knows
to be the
this.
permanent sub. I'm going to be the person who's going to
Yeah,
fill in.
yeah, and I know things will just flow and keep going just as if I'm there, and that's important. You always talk about. I don't know if you use the term apprentice. Is
Yes,
that the term that you
I
use?
would
Yeah.
say my number two, or multiplying myself in ministry, But an
Right.
apprentice for sure. I mean, I'm looking for somebody who I can teach the totality of all that I do so that I'm not the only one who can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so important
Yes,
to do in order to not be burnt out. It doesn't mean that you're not important. You're
of course.
important, but life happens. And God sometimes says, now's the time for you to go. So who's going to take over?
Yes,
Who's going to move over into the traffic circle when you leave?
yes,
And I think that is also valuable. Your lead pastor will value that
of
greatly,
course, of
that they
course.
know.
Another value that I think is, let's say that there's somebody on that innermost left lane and they are with you for an extended season, but the seasons of life come and
Yeah.
they need to know it's okay for you to merge right and take your nearest exit. And I, as the children's director, I can stop traffic in order to get a wounded
Mhm.
a wounded shepherd, a wounded co-leader to get off of this circle. And so they don't feel like they're trapped. And so if we can set up a culture where there's communication, there's honesty and feedback, we can help somebody to get off of
Yeah.
what somebody might call the rat race, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And I mean, when I train about volunteers and the traffic
Sure.
circle and things, I think about, again, if you don't know how the traffic circle works, it actually can be quite a disaster. So you must train well because you don't want someone weaving back and forth in
That's
those
true.
lanes if they're not using their signal. If a crash happens in the traffic circle, it can cause a lot of problems. So,
Right.
as good as it is, again, you must make sure that you're following the rules of the traffic circle. And I have to tell you, I should send a link to you. There is a roundabout in, I think it's Swinton, in Europe.
Oh my,
And
it's humongous.
it's huge, but you take a look at that. That is children's ministry.
Yes, because
That's
there's
really what a children's ministry roundabout looks like. I'm trying to keep it simple
yes,
to
but
start with.
there's a lot of moving parts though.
And they don't have any lanes. Like
Yes.
that's what like just is crazy, but I love it. It's such a good illustration
Yes.
of what you and I and all these volunteers are part of the
That's
bigger
right.
picture.
And I would say also, Leanne, a neat piece is we as the traffic like or the director of this thing, the traffic director, so to speak, I need to know ahead of time that the red car is going to be transitioning off at the half mark, and I need to have somebody else onboarding to replace
Yes.
that person. And so it's this kind of equilibrium, if you could go there, right? Like one
Yeah.
person's leaving, another person has to come on because that role still needs to be filled. And
Yeah.
so it becomes a coordination. It becomes a coordinated effort of this kind of traffic, and that's kind of fun. And you know what? You're right. My brother lives out in Colorado, where you did, and they were some of the first states in the states the first state in the states to have some of those traffic circles or these roundabouts. And he would get, when I was with him, I was like, oh my word, you're just winging around these things, right? And all of the locals, it was like just clockwork. Everybody just knew exactly what to do. And then you could see there was a tourist who was there to, go skiing in Colorado, and they were mucking up the whole thing, right? So
Yeah.
it does take some coordination. I do like this idea, however, of making sure that as somebody's leaving, you as the director are having somebody else pull on as they're pulling off.
Yeah. And you have to remember, as the director, I have to make sure I'm coming around at that right time when that person is off ramping and the other person is on ramping, right? I'm in the middle. I'm the constant for them so
Yes.
that we're coordinating both things. Because as much as I'd love to say the one who's off ramping, can you help the person on
Right.
ramping, which is great, but that doesn't always happen. So
Certainly not.
you have to be in the know.
Yes. And I would say another wonderful way to think about this is that as somebody is off going off and the next person's coming on, you of course are in that left closest to the middle lane. You're the constant and you can pull right up next to them. You can have
Yeah.
your windows down, you can have some communication, and they feel a little bit of safety with you. This is kind of fun, this idea. We're actually taking it quite far, and I think it's kind of fun. Another quick question as we kind of close out here. Where could people start? Where would people start with this idea? Like if all of a sudden,
Well,
let's say that they're stuck in a 52-week model where it's like, serve with me and I'm asking you for a full year commitment, or they're in the, hey, listen, if I get them, I'm I'm not allowing them to exit at all, right? I mean, we can get into that
yeah,
mode where it's
let
like,
me know how that works.
yeah, really, yeah, really. So where could
Where to
somebody start
start?
with this? Yeah.
Well, okay. I would always go back to prayer.
Yes.
And my life verse is Matthew 7:7.
Yes.
It says, ask and you'll be given what you ask for, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you.
I love that.
That verse, now, I mean, I don't have time to go into the whole context of the particular verse, and there's lots to it. But I have learned, because it's my life verse, that I can apply it into different places. And
Certainly.
so I would say ask, seek, and knock. So ask, you have to ask. Take a
Hmm.
look at this traffic circle as your year, and what, not just what is your need, but what is the vision? Where are you going? Because I
Yes,
don't want someone to get the concept of, oh, there we go, we're just going in circles. I mean, because that can be rather
I
negative,
understand. Yes, yes.
right? And that's not what we're after here. There is an actual goal to go in, start your ministry year and come out of that ministry
That's right.
year without accidents. Your,
I like
engines are
this.
running good.
Yes.
You
And
didn't run out of gas. You didn't
and
have to get pushed off.
another important thing is to think about your community and to think about your local context. And,
Yes.
you know, in Indiana, right? I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of things. You're never going to succeed on a Friday night being a public speaker in Indiana. Everybody's doing basketball. So you got to
Mm,
know different things, or Friday nights in Texas. That's pure football. My point is there are seasons that are unique to each community, and you have
yes.
to know those. And this is not a map, so to speak, that we superimpose on everybody. You have to pray and ask and consider your community and what might be best, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we should make sure that all leaders listening to this know this. You will be told no,
That's
and
right.
it's okay. Like, you don't want the people who say yes because they were convinced for
Or
some reason.
or
And
pressured, or and they said
yeah,
yes for the wrong reasons. I get it.
yeah. So, ask, and you will be given what you ask for. You'll find someone. You really will. Sometimes what we do is we don't ask because we make assumptions
Hmm.
or even excuses, if I could call them that, for the person.
All the
And I
time.
find that happens a lot. And do you know that there are people waiting for you to ask them? They
Amen.
want to belong to a community. They want to contribute. And if they can do that, especially using gifts and talents and skills, again, for a season,
Hmm.
then this is the perfect opportunity for them to get involved. And the seek part would be, when you're going around the traffic circle yourself that year, you are watching. Like, when you're in the traffic circle, you have to be aware of what's going on around you and beside you, and you're going to see people. I know we tend to look for like outgoing and very hospitable people, and just, we kind of have our criteria. And I want you just to have God open your eyes to other
Right.
people. I remember one lady, she was so quiet and so gentle. She was perfect for the kids who
Hmm.
needed someone just like that. Her role was so vitally important
Yeah,
in our kids
we need
ministry.
to open our eyes and understand the vast variety of gifts and abilities and personalities. And if we're only looking, I always say, you know, don't just seek the pretty people. And I don't mean pretty in looking. I'm saying, like, the people who seem to have it all together and they're a hyper extrovert. No, the
Yeah,
body needs all of us. And
yeah,
so that's really good.
yeah.
And so the idea of having you've got to be a driver who's looking around you, right?
You do. You have to be aware. And then the last one, just going with that verse, is knocking. And I mean, physically knocking on a door
I
is
love
one
this.
thing, but now knocking is a text message that gets followed
Hmm.
up with a phone call. Just saying hello. I remember someone telling me, he's a professor at a Bible school here that teaches children's and family ministries, and he said, "How about just calling someone up and asking how you can pray for them?"
Guaranteed. That's one of
And
the
then
main
and
tenets
then just
of the,
stop there.
that's one of the
Like,
main,
don't even
yeah,
ask
inside
about
of Lead
volunteering.
Volunteers. That's what we do.
Yeah,
And we have
because
an,
you never know. You remember The Price is Right? I think it's still even on,
oh,
right?
yes,
It's a
yes,
TV show. Like, not that you knock on those doors, but remember he's like, "What's behind door number
yes,
1?" Or you don't know what you're gonna get, and it could just be the most wonderful prize in
that's
a
right.
person, and maybe very opposite from you, because I need that, Josh.
I
I
do
need
too.
opposite skills and personality because I am not very good at some
Yeah.
some
I always
things.
talk about helping people to see that they need to recruit to their weaknesses,
Oh, yeah, that's good.
right? Whatever you don't have, somebody else in the body certainly
Mhm.
does have. Wow, this has been a fun conversation, and I think we should do it again. You've got a
I'd love
lot,
to.
you've got a lot on the ball. Well, hey, very briefly, you
Mhm.
have a ministry. You now are no longer serving directly in a local church, but now you come alongside and serve those in the local church. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
That's right. Well, with Handle with Care Ministries, I partner with churches
Hmm.
to provide training, support, and care for the children's ministry leaders and their church families. And I do that by consulting, coaching. I can use the curriculum that I have created
Hmm.
to help train on site. Locally here, and I also am just able to, because of the pandemic, who knew what God
That's
would do
right.
in the pandemic, right? And look at what has happened in your ministry. And so the same thing for me. I really felt the Lord saying, all these years of writing content, it was time to put it together for other people. And I focus very much on mercy, grace, and righteousness.
Yes,
There are so many great curriculums out there already to do the Bible stories. And so that's kind of where I focus.
I get
And
it.
yeah, so
That's
it's been fun.
And
Yeah.
so I'm very proud of you. Super good
Thank you.
job. Well, listen, let's keep this conversation going. I would love to have another call with you because you are a very gifted person, and you've been doing this for so many years. You have so and I really do appreciate this analogy that you brought to us today. Leanne, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Josh, for having me. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I hope it helps
Absolutely.
you.
That's great. Well, gang, thank you guys so much for checking out yet another episode of the Lead Volunteers podcast, and we will catch you on the next one.